Hey everybody, and welcome back. In today's video, I'm going to be walking through how to replace your stock cooler for your CPU with an upgraded cooler. So we're not going to be doing water cooling, but we are going to be using a much larger setup. So this has a much larger fan, RGB lights, and a much larger radiator for heat dissipation. The brand for this, we'll see right here. I got this on Amazon, I want to say for between $20 and $25. Comes with pretty much all the hardware you're going to need. So before we get started, just to walk through the basics for those of you struggling to get these stock coolers off, they can be a little bit of a pain. So just to help you understand how they work a little bit, we have these plastic pieces that feed through holes in the motherboard. And then when this piece is pushed in, you'll see this black piece comes out and it basically spaces out these two plastic pieces. So that is what's securing it to the motherboard, and then this will typically be screwed in. So to remove this, you have this here. You would typically just unscrew these screws and pull them back, and you'll do that for all of them. A lot of people recommend doing this on a CPU that's moderately warm because the thermal paste sometimes can cause them to stick together. But once these pieces are pulled out, you should be able to rotate and get this off the CPU. Don't pull too hard. For me, for example, these plastic pieces were kind of stuck in place, so I had to remove the back of the PC, which I had to do anyway. And I just kind of pinched them together and pushed one through, and the rest of them kind of followed. So that's really all that you're going to need to do to get this cooler off. Now, as far as installing the new cooler, I'm not going to do everything here primarily because I'm waiting on the new processor. So this is my budget gaming build, building it for just under, I think, around 350 USD. And the idea is I'm switching this i3 to an i7. So what I'm going to do is walk through the basic installation for this new CPU fan. It's going to be pretty similar for most. So the general idea is we have our back plate, which is going to go on the back of the motherboard in a second. We have the front mounting hardware, and the way that this is going to work is it's going to screw on kind of like this. So you'll see right here we have a screw, and we have a screw on this one over here as well. When these are mounted to the front, the new cooler is going to mount into these two screws. So the way that this works is the back plate goes on the back of the motherboard. We have these spacers to help us to avoid any of the components around the processor. And these will connect just like this, allowing a little bit of space between. And then when this is connected completely, it'll look like this. And then we just mount on top of these screws here. So we'll go ahead and get started with that. One thing I would definitely make sure that you do before you get started, first and foremost, make sure you're buying these for the correct socket type or size. Mine is, I think, an 1150. This fits, but it also does have an adjustment. So you can actually adjust these by pulling them out and accommodate for a larger size. In that case, in this case, we don't really need that. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring the camera around to this side and focus on the back of the motherboard. So first and foremost, I would recommend getting these in the correct orientation just because it's really easy to get kind of confused for how the spacers are expected to go on. So we have the back plate. This will go on right over the back of the processor. So basically you'll just line it up with these holes here, where your other CPU cooler was probably already mounted in. And then on the front, we will begin getting this first bracket screwed in. And I'm just tightening loosely by hand in the beginning, just to make sure that everything fits the way that I need it to. All right, so once you start feeding it in, you may get a little resistance, so that's why I usually just keep a screwdriver handy just to kind of get a little bit more of a grip on it. Then we will put on our second spacer. So this will go behind the metal bracket on the front, and then basically this will go on the other side of the metal bracket, securing it to this back plate. So we will do that here. All right. So when you're doing this, also, if you have one of these adjustable back plates, the other thing to note is sometimes they can get a little bit weird when you're getting these things screwed in. So a couple of recommendations: if you have any kind of tape that's not going to leave behind any serious residue or anything like that. It'll be helpful to keep this piece on. I've found that it's usually sufficient just to get these screws started, just so the back plate doesn't fall off completely. But in this case, everything is working. So we have the first one, again, lightly screwing everything in, not putting too much pressure on anything since our motherboard is screwed in. And now we're going to bring this to the front to show exactly what it looks like. So we have the first one done. Again, it's a little bit loose, but we are not finished tightening it just yet. So what we're going to do now is repeat the process for this one. So again, same exact thing. We have our 2 spacers, 2 screws. They will essentially just mount on in the exact same fashion. So we have the screw that goes through this piece, mounts on just like this. And again, repeating the exact same process. Obviously make sure that you don't lose your screws. A couple of these may have extras, but it's just easier to make sure that you have everything organized. So what we do at this point is we will repeat that exact same process for this one. So we'll get this mounted in. And then what we are going to do next is move forward with the actual installation of the fan. All right, so I went ahead and took care of that one just to speed the video up a bit. So you'll see we have the mounting hardware set up, mounting bracket on the back. So at this point we need to get our fan set up. So I only have one fan included with this one. So basically you'll see we have the fan on the front. Now I'm sure that different manufacturers do this different ways, but in this case we have these metal pieces that look similar to the pieces that hold the CPU in. So the way that these work is you'll see right here how I have it mounted on this side. So I'll show you how I did it on this side. So the actual metal indentations here allow for this to clip on. So you can feed these into the holes where the screws would normally go on the actual fan. And then this will clip in right in these ridges. You just want to make sure that it's firmly secured on both sides. And then this way, you'll see that we have the fan firmly secured right where we need it. And then when you're doing this, make sure that the wiring is where you want it to be. So in this case, this is going to be mounting flush right here with the CPU. So I have the cords set up to where they're a little bit hidden, and I can basically try to go through the top of the case, but these are going to be plugged in. So you'll see we actually have 2. So we have the lights and the actual fan power itself. So the 4-pin, if I'm not mistaken, is going to be the one for the fan power. And then the other one we will be able to get set up and plugged in for the RGB. So we will go ahead and walk through the basics of essentially just getting this thing mounted. So in this case, what we're going to do is I'm going to just give you a quick overview. I'm not mounting it just yet because I'm swapping out the processor, but this plastic piece is just kind of protecting this. So you'll remove this. Some of these have a pad or a piece of tape just to make sure. So you want these to be as flush with the CPU as possible. So some of these, when you pull this plastic piece off, there will be some kind of a soft material laid down that you may or may not need to remove. So consult with the instructions of the manufacturer just to make sure. But basically when you remove that, you have a completely flat and clean surface, and then you're going to want to replace your thermal paste. I'm not covering that in this video, but it's usually pretty simple. You can find a cleaning solution online. Most of the time you will get new thermal compound with your actual basically your cooling equipment. Whether or not you want to use that or go with a different company, that's entirely up to you. But basically all you're doing is wiping everything down, making sure that that's clean, applying your new thermal compound across the entire CPU. And then basically all we're doing left, or all we have left, keep these cords out to the side. These pieces right here are screws. So basically all you need to do to get this piece installed is line everything up. These screws line up with the 2 screws on the mounting hardware here. So I'll move this a little bit closer. So we would line everything up, we will screw it in, and then we will take the cords, which we have off to the side, plug them into the corresponding parts on the motherboard. Again, make sure that you're plugging everything in correctly. Sometimes they'll provide 2 or 3 pins or have different types of cords and adapters set up. So just make sure you're plugging in what's necessary per the instruction manual. But that's really all that there is to it. So I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, drop them in the comment box below, and I'll see you all in the next video. And don't forget to check out the link in the description where I'll show the full build once this is completed.